Assalamu Alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here tonight and inviting me to share with you what we at ISPU know about the status or engagement of American Muslim women and families. I'm going to share based on our research, obviously, and my own journey to get to this point. And before I get started, I want to thank my dad who joined me here today. I asked him to join me because as a young Yemeni child, I was with him everywhere he went, including his place of employment, which is so untypical for Yemeni women to be, and Yemeni girls. So it is my chance to thank him and bring him with me in places that he doesn't get to go. And that's a little parenting tip for any parent here who is wondering how do you instill that in your young daughters from the beginning. Two pieces of advice based on my own experience. Build their self-confidence from day number one. That's all they need. If they have the confidence and the internal confidence in themselves. And two, show them places where they can be that are traditionally not theirs, so they can be comfortable being in those places when they're older. So with that said, I'm going to talk about, I know the topic was how do we increase women engagement in the community? And I thought really, really hard about how to tackle that topic, and there's so many different ways to talk about it. But I realized before we get into how to increase engagement of American Muslim women, let's share a little bit of what we know. Who are American Muslims? Who are we talking about in the first place? What are some of the challenges that we face, not as a list of, oh my God, we have so much to deal with, but as an opportunity to learn about, okay, maybe these are some of the obstacles that are preventing men and women from being engaged, but also as opportunities for engagement. We need to broaden our understanding of what engagement is. Traditionally, we might have a certain way of thinking women engagement, might be in the masjid, might be planning events. So I'm hoping that by sharing the challenges that American Muslims in general, and American Muslim women in specific face, then I'm broadening the opportunities for us to be engaged. And then I'm going to end it with specific recommendations that I have for us as a community. So follow us on social media if you don't already, because we do research on American Muslims. Everything that is on your mind about American Muslims or a question that you have, we probably have some research on it. And our research focus on solutions, not just to tell you what the problem is. Our mission is to provide objective research and education. Our goal is that we want every decision about American Muslims to be informed and based on fact, whether it's American Muslims that are making that decision or non-American Muslims. Okay, there for so long, decisions about American Muslims have been based on, people just sharing their opinions, or unfortunately, in some instances, those who claim to be knowledgeable about the American Muslim community is speaking on our behalf. And so, alhamdulillah, for the last 20 years, we've had an institution that have documented our journey and our experience, and now we can share that based on facts. This research, or what I'm sharing today, comes from one of our largest research projects, American Muslim Poll, which not only survey American Muslims, it survey the general public, it survey other faith communities. And this is really critical because for the first time, we're putting American Muslims in the religious landscape of America. We're not talking about them as an exceptional community or as this community that you cannot understand. They're so different from everyone else. Now you could look at our research and say, you know what? This is how American Muslims think about this issue, but I could also tell you how American Jews, Protestants, Catholics, white evangelicals, and the general public are thinking about the exact same issue. And that's important for us to understand that. So, who are American Muslims? We're the most ethnically diverse faith community. This is the first line you will see here. Why does that matter when we think of engagement, right? Engagement might look very different in the Arab community versus in the Asian, South Asian community versus in the African American community, which have a longer history in this nation. And so we need to keep that in mind as we think of the larger American Muslim community. We also need to keep that in mind as we think of what can we learn from each other. We don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel every single time. Somebody have done this before us, let's learn. We're the youngest faith community. 26% of American Muslims are between the ages of 18 and 24. So 2 points on this specific slide over here. If young American Muslims in this community are already engaged, alhamdulillah, what are you doing so well to keep them engaged so we could replicate it in other communities? If you're not seeing them engaged in this community, that's one area we need to stop and address. What is it that's preventing our young Muslims from becoming engaged with the masjid, from becoming engaged with Muslim-related issues, okay? Half of American Muslims are born in this country and half are born overseas. So again, every single piece of this data have its own issues that we need to keep in mind. You know, we have immigrants, some of them here are second and third generation. We also have newcomers. Each one of these groups, engagement will be so different to them, challenges will be different to them, what their priorities and focus will be different from the community before them. So that's for all of us to keep in mind. And how do we create a space where everyone feel they have a say, or that they could bring, you know, their whole self into. Muslims remain America's most likely faith community to be poor. So a third of our community lives at poverty line, right? Alhamdulillah, we also have about 22% that's on the other end of the socioeconomic spectrum. But if a third of our Muslim community is poor, then we're thinking, you know, they're thinking of basic needs. They're thinking of, I need to make ends meet, I need to provide for my family. Their level of engagement, or what they're thinking of engagement, might not be the same as those who are on the other end. Another thing to think about here is, for those of us who are fortunate, alhamdulillah, are we thinking about this third of the community when we're being engaged, right? Are we representing their issues and their interests in our engagement? 36% of Muslim adults are caring for an elder, compared to 15% in the general public. I don't have data to back this up, but I'm gonna say probably the majority of them are women, right? Whether you're taking care of, you know, your parents or your in-laws, you know, if you're part of this demographic here, you might not have the flexibility to be, for example, at every masjid's event or at every political event that's taken place in the community. How can we think of engaging this demographic differently? You know, is social media or virtual work or virtual engagement an option for them? Another group to think about here is a third of American Muslims know or have a family member who have a disability. You know, so again, how is our masjid or how is our community center accommodating or welcoming those families? And again, I'm not sharing this to say this place specifically is not. I just want to give us a broader understanding of the community that we're living amongst and that we represent, so we can think of, you know, what is traditional in our traditional engagement? How do we broaden that definition? How do we count everything that we're doing as a community? I know other faith communities, and I'm sure many of you here do, they count every single thing they do. If they volunteer at like a random cost for 2 hours, those 2 hours are counted. We're a community that's very generous. We do so much, but we don't count it. We think of engagement in terms of, did I vote? Did I donated a lot of money? No, we need to broaden that definition, because every aspect of the work that we do is given to society. And if we're not counting that and measuring it somehow, one, we don't know all the work that we're doing. We can't report on it, and we can't share with other communities in larger society all of our contributions. We continue to underestimate the work that we do as a community. Muslims are as likely as most other groups to have a college degree or higher education. So again, one thing that we need to think about for American Muslims, the word diversity, we encompasses that in every aspect of you could imagine, whether it's the diversity in terms of ethnic and racial groups, whether it's the socioeconomic status, whether it's the level of education, because here we have 46 who have a college degree, but we also have, community members who are illiterate. And maybe part of one thing that we're not counting here is technology literacy, right? If we are a community or a group of people that's moving to do a lot of our work virtually or online, and we have community members or elders who do not have technology literacy, then are we leaving a segment of our community out? That's another area of engagement that we all, well, maybe not all, but some of us can contribute to. Muslim women surpass men in education. So I'm gonna, in my presentation, I'm doing general, but I'm also inserting things that are specific to Muslim women because I know that's the focus of this topic. So alhamdulillah, we have a high level of education among American Muslim women, but we also have communities, sometimes here in Michigan, that young women have to really, really fight to get into school, to continue school, and to do that education before marriage or at all. Women across most groups less likely than men to be employed full-time. So one of the things that people often will talk about Muslim women, they're all just stay at home. Again, it's one of those things where we talk about Muslim women as if they're the exception. They don't look like other women of faith. But here in this data, you'll see, yes, to only 29% of Muslim women are employed full-time, but that's true across other faith groups too, right? This is only for full-time employment. Does that mean that we have Muslim women who might be working 2 or 3 part-time jobs? That's not counted in this data. Or do we have a large segment of our community that stay-at-home moms? Again, none of these options is more right than the other. It's just trying to understand who are American Muslim women and how do they look compared to other faith communities. Muslim women more likely than Muslim men to be middle class. Again, here we have a higher level of education among Muslim women. We also have a higher level of income among Muslim women, which is interesting because they're less likely to be employed full-time. And don't ask me the connection. We need to do more research on that one. Muslim women have similar attendance similar to men in mosque attendance. So this graph here have actually 2 different data points. The light blue talks about how important do you think your religion is to you? And you'll see here 87% of Muslim men and 91% of Muslim women say their religion is very important to them. Okay? And then for religious attendance once a week or more, we have 45%, and 35%. This is interesting because we know it's required of men to attend, but it's not required of women to attend. But here we see a similar level of attendance for men and women in terms of attending a mosque. And then American Muslims more likely than most other groups to say their religion is very important to them. So it's not only it's important to them, and all of our research, we see this come back in so many different ways. One, they see it as a source of happiness. They see it as where they find purpose and meaning to their life. These points we share a lot with non-Muslims, especially professionals, especially as we talk about mental health issues, as we talk about addressing different needs in the community. If Muslims are saying my faith is so important to me and it gives me purpose and gives meaning to my life, but the general public see Islam as a problem that need to be disassociated from Muslims, then we have a huge disconnect. We have a huge problem. If, for example, mental health experts see a problem with Islam, and we have Muslims who need who need help with mental health issues, and they go to their therapist, and the therapist say, oh, your religion is part of the problem, then we start to see a problem. Do you see what I'm saying? It's the importance of sharing these data points is so we can connect the dots between American Muslims and how they view themselves and how others are viewing them, because at the end of the day, we're never gonna have enough representation in anything that we need. From a numbers perspective, we're only 1% of the population in this country. This one is very interesting because I know many people think that young Muslims don't see they don't see their religion as important. But here, this is where young Muslims and older Muslims actually are the same, and young Muslims are actually different from their peers in the general public. So the orange is Muslims, and the blue is the general public. You'll see those ages 18 to 29 are almost the same as those who are 50 and older among American Muslims, and saying, my religion is very important to me. That makes the 18 to 29-year-old Muslims very different from their peers, who only 30% of them say their faith is important to them or their religion is important to them. One of the issues that often comes up in our conversation about Muslim women is that of the hijab. So the data on this is 50% of American Muslim women wear the hijab and 50% don't, okay? Those are separate conversations. For those who do wear the hijab, the majority of them say they wear it because of a religious obligation to please God or out of piety. 21% say because they want people to know they're Muslim, so a religious identity. And then 12% say they wear it because of modesty, or just to have a modest dress code. Only 1% say they were required by someone else. What's interesting about this 1%, it's actually lower than some of the other faith communities, specifically Jews and Catholics, where it's actually higher than the 1%. All right, so that's who we are. This next section, again, I want to reiterate, I'm presenting it for two reasons. One, I want us to know some of the challenges that we all face, but specifically some Muslim women face, that might have discouraged more engagement, whether it's in the mosque community, in the larger community, or just in general. But I also want all of us to view this section as different areas where different groups here can be more engaged. This is where we could broaden our definition of engagement, right? These are all challenges that we need to address. They're not gonna fix themselves. They're here preventing us from fully realizing our potential as a community. So we need to address them, but I can't address all of them. You can't address all of them. Some of us are educators, some of us are medical professionals, some of us are hopefully media personnel. So whatever field you're in, you have something to do in this section. So Islamophobia, this is a term that I want you to get comfortable saying. Don't debate it. You could debate it amongst yourself if you want to. You could bring Muslim speakers and say, I don't really believe in Islamophobia. But when you're out in the public and talking with others, get comfortable saying Islamophobia. Get comfortable saying our community is facing this challenge. Why am I asking you to do that? Because it's real. It's real. Scholars have spent years studying this. It's well documented. You could debate it all you want. That's okay for us to debate, just like we debate when Ramadan begins. At the end of the day, Ramadan will begin and we're all gonna have to fast, but it's a real thing. So is Islamophobia. It's a thing that's impacting every single one of us. It's impacting those who are perceived to be Muslim, right? It's also impacting and harmful for democracy and security of this nation that many of us chose to be here. And so the research showed that a higher Islamophobia index, or a higher belief in Islamophobic stereotypes, is linked to greater acceptance of military targeting of civilians. That's a war crime under the Geneva Convention. a greater acceptance of individuals targeting civilians. So random Joe taking place policing into his own hands, right? I have an issue with you, I'm gonna fix it. I don't need to go to law enforcement. Greater acceptance of authoritarian attitudes. Suspending our checks and balances, limiting freedom of the press. These are the things that this democracy stand on. And if people start believing that it is okay to suspend these practices when we feel we're under threat, then that's how democracy slowly dies. And then, of course, greater support for discriminatory policies against American Muslims, including the Muslim ban, surveillance of mosques, surveillance of American Muslims themselves, and so on and so forth. What does Islamophobia look like? Okay, right? How do we all experience it? So first of all, we ask the public, how much do you agree with the following statements? Right? You could replace the word Muslim with anything else if you want to, but the statements we ask people is, most Muslims live in the US are more prone to violence. Just, naturally, as American Muslims, we're more prone to violence than other people. Most Muslims living in the US discriminate against women. This is a connection here. Most Muslims living in the US are hostile to the United States. Most Muslims living in the US are less civilized. That's always my favorite one. Most Muslims living in the United States are partially responsible for acts of violence carried out by other Muslims. For the last 20 years, we were asked to justify acts of other people that we didn't even know. This is where this one comes from. No one is asking other groups to do the same right now. Okay? So these are the statements we ask people. How much do you agree with these statements? They're not randomly selected. They're selected because, again, research show the connection between them and discriminatory policies toward American Muslims. Interestingly enough, the most popular out of those stereotypes is most Muslims discriminate against women. That's the top ranking one, right? That's the one where wars literally have been launched in this country to liberate Muslim women, right? And again, that's not to say we don't have issues in our community in terms of discrimination. We do. We need to address them. But that's what everyone else is saying, okay? We did ask Muslim men and Muslim women, do you agree with that? And of course, the results were no. That's not true. And again, it's not to say we don't have discrimination, it's just to say that's not the number one priority. What do Muslim women experience in terms of discrimination? So you'll see here, Muslim women, just like women in the general public, experience gender discrimination, right? This is the world we live in. Gender discrimination is always gonna be around. But where Muslim women stand out is in their experience of racial and religious discrimination. What does that mean? That means, think of the experience of a South Asian, obviously brown, muhajjaba, Muslim woman, compared to a white Catholic woman in this country who have the same level of education, who have the same socioeconomic status, same opportunities. Their experience will always be different because the Muslim woman will be looked at through the racial and the religious lens and the gender lens, right? And I'll show you later in the slides, this came true after the 2016 election where Muslim women feared for their physical safety. It wasn't all in our head, it was real. And I know Muslim men felt it too, but it is so different to experience that as a Muslim woman. I know I could tell you myself, I'm a woman who spent all of my life, my dad's here and he's like, yeah, I know, spent all of my life saying anything that makes me afraid, I'm gonna do it. I refuse to live in a world where I'm afraid. After 2016 election, I didn't fear so much for myself because, when you're part of a family, like you think of yourself kind of last, especially if you're the older in that family. But I genuinely started worrying about my family members. Every time he went to the masjid, I didn't tell him any of this. He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. But every time he went to the masjid, I was really worried that something will happen in the masjid. Every time he went and he took his grandkids with him, you know, part of me was so happy that he got to spend that time, but I was worried about them. Every time my sisters who are all muhajjabat went to the university to work, you know, because of all the incidents that we had on campuses, I was worried, and we all established, you know, like location sharing and all of these crazy things that we never had to do before. But that's the reality that a lot of, you know, folks are living in today, and we need to keep that in mind as we think of what is our where is our safe space as Muslims? Is that safe space, which for most of us, that's the masjid, is that inclusive for all of us? Or are parts of our community, when they come to the masjid, they are not feeling safe in the masjid too, right? Our youth, the question we need to ask ourselves, does our youth feel, or do our youth feel safe and welcome when they come here? Do they feel like they have a place to be who they are? Even if they're doing the things that irritate you as parents, can they come here and be themselves so they could go out and face the world? Are our converts feeling safe and welcomed? Are women feeling safe and welcomed? Our brothers and sisters of, you know, the African American community or other race that, you know, if this is I'm just, you know, saying, if this is like a South Asian mosque, can, you know, the members of the Arab community or the African American community or whatever other community, can they come and still feel welcomed? And all of these questions, I ask them of every single masjid to ask themselves. And if you say yes, that's amazing. Go ask members of those communities if that's true. And if the answer is no, then what are we doing to address those challenges? Because if our masajid and our community centers are not the safest place for us as community members, then how can we go out and face all of this? All right. Go back to this to the topic here. The U.S. media further perception that Muslims are misogynistic, right? So we already established Muslim men and women say, no, we're not misogynistic. We do have misogyny and misogynistic issues in our community, but they're no different than other faith community. But the media, just like it continues to perpetrate the idea that Muslim men are terrorists, that Muslims are backward and less civilized for years. This is not a new issue that came out, you know, that came up in 2001. This predates 2001. If you're interested in this topic, look at Jack Shaheen's work, Edward Said, which are all non-Muslim, but that's the work they documented, how the media portrays American, you know, Muslims and Arabs, and for years, and the, you know, the images, you know, the terrorist, the suicide bomber, the oil sheikh, and of course the misogynistic men, and the women are oppressed and backward. And so news sites and news media continue to perpetrate that narrative. Even in places where women have equal rights, or the record of those countries is high in terms of opportunities for women. The New York Times, specifically in the Washington Post, you'll see here, this is a study that was documented for 35 years. So this is not just like a random incident. Continue to cover or to be driven by confirmation bias. What that means is they will only share the stories that confirm that those countries are misogynistic, you know, that those countries are backward, that those countries have women's status that's different than the rest of the world, and it is because they're Muslim. So here, how does that again translate to our experience? How does all of this translate to our everyday experience? 62% of American Muslims, adults, men and women, say they have experienced religious-based discrimination in the last year. Okay? Where does that take place mostly? That takes place when they're applying for jobs, when they're interacting with law enforcement, at the airport, when receiving healthcare services. Think of that during a pandemic, or if you're taking care of elderly parents. On social media platforms, from the platform itself. So this is not just from other users, this is from, you know, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the platform itself discriminated against the community. And then here, this is where we're kind of similar to others, is the interpersonal experiences and from social media users themselves. I know I'm coming close to time. I'm gonna wrap it up here with children. So close to 50% of Muslim families say they have a child who've experienced religious-based discrimination or bullying in the public school setting last year. And the top part here is the 20%. They say they've experienced that almost daily. And this is where it's shocking that 1 out of 3 cases is actually at the hands of an adult in the school system. Okay, so this is where I connect this to the stereotypes that I shared with you earlier, because what will make an educator discriminate against a child if it's not the subconscious bias they believe about that child and their background? All right, I'm gonna skip through a lot of these over here because I wanna share this very quickly. I already shared, we're very proud of our faith. Muslim women do engage differently. They donate higher levels to causes around youth and family services and overseas relief. So that's another way to look at how Muslim women are engaged. They're most likely to take action post-election. So to sign up for self-defense class, to increase their donation to an organization associated with their faith. The recommendations I have for the community: increase get out the vote messages to Muslim women and youth, because those are the 2 groups that are less likely to actually make plans to vote. Out of everyone else, we have made huge success in terms of increasing our level of civic engagement. Muslim women and the youth tend to be kind of on the back a little bit. Educate American Muslims about voters about how to respond to obstacles. We continue to be the community that faces a lot of obstacles there. And all of this, I brought a lot of literature with me that have exactly what you need to do around this. Recognize internalized Islamophobia. This is a very important piece here. In all of our research on Islamophobia, internalized Islamophobia continue to be on the rise. That means we as Muslims are starting to believe those stereotypes that I shared with you earlier. The only 2 factors that are linked to increased internalized Islamophobia is gender discrimination and sectarian discrimination. So those are the 2 things that we need to address in our community in order to address internalized Islamophobia. Address mental health issues, or create a space where people can come and address mental health needs. And then promote and facilitate careers in media and mental health. Again, we don't all need to go and be doctors and lawyers and teachers. We have a lot of other things that we need to address. Educate yourself about them, educate your children about them so they can choose these tracks. I'm gonna stop here. There was a section about the mosque. The point of the mosque is there's a lot of research that show an increased participation in the mosque is connected to all of these things: volunteering, civic engagement, donation to the masjid, all of that. But in order for people to be more engaged in the masjid, it needs to be a place where they all feel welcomed, okay? So I'm gonna stop here because I know I'm at time, and maybe take 1 or 2 questions. Thank you so much. I know that was a lot of information that I just shared with you, but I hope you kind of process it afterward. I'm happy to share the slides, and of course, there's a lot of literature that you could take with you. Any questions here? Fadal. Yeah, absolutely. So everything that we do is available online, free for everyone to access. The full reports, we make videos, infographics, so people don't have to read the full report. For those who are interested in the data itself, that want to look into the data, we just ask that you email us, so we know who's asking for it and why, and we're happy to share it. Everything is accessible because we want everyone to have access to it. Other questions? Unfortunately, we don't do studies on anyone under 18 because in order to do that, it's like a nightmare process, and we haven't gotten into that field, but we work very closely with other organizations like Family and Youth Institute and others that do specific research on American Muslim youth. But we study American Muslim adults. In terms of them engaging with ISPU directly, we do have a next gen advisory council that's 18 and older, younger people, to help advise us on our programs and the research topics that are related to them. Last one. Yeah, crucial. It's crucial for us to engage not only with each other, but with other communities. However, in all of our research, it shows, friendly at the service interfaith work is good, but it doesn't address Islamophobia. We do need to do the deep work. We do need to do the deep engagement. We're not going to agree with everyone, but we also need to be realistic about where we as Muslims stand on social issues and where others do. We don't have to compromise who we are in order to come to agreement on addressing those issues. And if anyone is looking at, like, for example, environmental justice, abortion, gun control, all of these topics that everyone is interested in, we have that data on our website. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a time to reflect on some of this. I'm happy to, answer questions some other time. And I want to thank you all for inviting me to be here today.
Thank you, Sister Petra. I give you full credit for this. This is one of the very few times we saw the audience really, really quiet and listening to you for the entire presentation. So thank you very much. This was an interesting topic. And thank you, everyone, for listening to her presentation. I know she put this together, it took a lot of time, so thank you for paying attention to her topic. A couple of things I wanted to, based on what you had said earlier. One thing you said is a lot of Muslim community, I think 36% of our Muslim community is handling or managing any adult in the families. So we do have this here too. But IAGD overall is more than just a masjid organization. We do a lot of social activities. We, in fact, have a lot of committees like interfaith, outreach, sports, and social activities committees, lots of them. And along with that, we have recently started a seniors committee also. So we bring all the seniors together. The thing we struggle with is participation. So if you have any ideas, all that, our committee would love to hear those and then get those implemented, because that is one thing we like to get is more involvement from others, or especially our seniors. And also, as far as the women or sisters involvement, our organization is unique that we do have a lot of participation and help from a lot of sisters. In fact, our vice president you met is Sister Fawzia. So our community is blessed to have this kind of support. And again, we always say that sisters are backbone of our community. We get a lot of help from them that we cannot even pay to get that much. So it's very good. Thank you very much. And once again, I think this was very interesting and good topic to talk and hear about. Thank you everyone for attending. Like I said earlier, if there are suggestions for any future topics, please do let us know, and then we will try to bring the speakers to accommodate that. Assalamu Alaikum.